If you whistled after the sun went down at my grandmother's house, she would drop whatever she was doing, a pot on the stove, laundry on the line, it didn't matter, and come running to clap her hand over your mouth. I thought it was crazy. Until the night, I understood she was never, ever exaggerating. And what I found out about that rule completely changed the way I see my own family. Let me set the scene. I spent every summer at my grandparents' farm in rural Kansas. No neighbors for miles. Just cornfields, an old barn, a dog named Duke, and a silence that at night got so thick you could hear your own heartbeat. And for as long as I can remember, there was a rule nobody explained, but everybody obeyed, like it was federal law. Once the sun goes down, nobody whistles in that house. My grandfather never even questioned it. He simply didn't do it. My uncles, grown men, married, with kids of their own, still followed it whenever they visited. And me? I was about 8 years old and way too curious for my own good. I whistled softly, out in the yard, the sky already turning purple. I hadn't even finished the note before my grandmother was right beside me, hand over my mouth, eyes wide, whispering, "Never do that again." It wasn't a cranky grandma scolding. It was real fear. I saw it on her face. I asked her right then, "Why, Grandma?" She just answered, eyes still fixed on the horizon, "Because there's something out there that answers a whistle, and you won't like what comes." That was it. No explanation, no story. Just that one line, repeated every time someone, usually a younger cousin who didn't know better, broke the rule without realizing it. I grew up. It became routine. One of those family quirks you just accept without question, like never walking under a ladder or never opening an umbrella indoors. But unlike silly superstition, this rule carried weight. There was history behind it, and I only found out years later in a conversation I'll never forget. I was about 14 when my great-grandfather, my grandfather's father, already in his late 80s, came to stay at the farm for a while. A man of few words, but when he spoke, it was always worth listening. One afternoon, sitting on the porch watching the sun go down, I asked him straight out, "Grandpa, why can't anyone whistle after dark?" He sat quiet for a while, looked out at the cornfield. Then he started talking, slowly, choosing his words with care. He told me that back in the 1930s and 40s, when his family first settled that land, there was no electricity, no electric fencing, no telephone, nothing, separating the house from the total darkness outside. And in that kind of darkness, sound travels in a way we can't even imagine today. Settlers in that region learned, through loss and fear, that certain nighttime sounds attracted things nobody wanted nearby. Wolves, coyotes, animals that responded to a whistle as if it were the call of another animal or a wounded one. Then he paused, looked at me, and said, "But it wasn't just animals we learned to protect ourselves from." What? And that's when the story got serious. He told me about his younger brother. My great-great-grandfather would have been about 9 or 10 at the time, on a moonless night, right after dinner. The boy went out to fetch water from the well, and, not knowing the rule yet, started whistling some tune just to keep himself company in the dark. Minutes later, the family heard footsteps approaching the house. Not animal footsteps, human ones. A stranger appeared at the fence, saying he'd heard the whistle from almost a mile away and came to see what it was, because back then, in a place that isolated, a whistle at night could be read as a signal. A code, a call between people coordinating something in secret. And in a time when cattle theft, land disputes, and border conflicts were common in that part of Kansas, a stranger emerging out of the dark, drawn in by a sound, was never good news, not even close. My great-grandfather never told me the full details of what happened after that man reached the gate. He just said, in the quietest voice I'd ever heard from him, "We got lucky that night." But just barely. Then he added, "From then on, nobody whistled after sundown again. It became the rule. It became protection, and we never broke it." What really gave me chills was finding out, years later, that this rule didn't exist only in my family. Talking to other people from rural backgrounds from Kansas, Texas, even parts of Missouri, I realized this same superstition, or this same hard-earned lesson, kept showing up, with variations. Some families said whistling at night attracted spirits. Others, like mine, treated it as purely practical, a matter of safety, about who or what might be listening in the dark. But the pattern repeated every time. Isolated families, no electricity, learning generation after generation that silence after nightfall meant survival. This wasn't silly superstition. It was ancestral knowledge disguised as an old-fashioned grandma rule. My grandmother passed away a few years ago, and in one of our last conversations, I asked about the rule again, already knowing most of the story from my great-grandfather, but wanting to hear her version of it. She smiled, a tired kind of smile, and said, "I know it sounds silly now. You all have lights everywhere, cell phones, cameras on every door. But I couldn't stop myself from teaching you that, because that's how I was taught to protect you." That's when it hit me. The rule was never really about wolves or a stranger at the gate. It was about love, turned into habit. It was an entire family unknowingly carrying forward a survival lesson that became an emotional inheritance. My grandmother wasn't afraid of whistling. She was afraid of losing someone she loved. And the only way she knew how to protect me was to repeat exactly what had once protected her. Today, even living in the city, far from that cornfield, far from that porch, when it gets dark, something inside me still holds back the whistle in my throat. It's not fear, it's respect. It's memory. I don't know if I'll ever teach that same rule to my own kids someday, but I know I'll tell them this story. Because some family rules were never really about what they say they're about, who cared enough to protect you from something you didn't even know existed. If your family had a strange rule too, one that was never explained, one that only made sense years later, I want to hear it. Tell me in the comments where you're from and what the rule was. And if you love real stories, family tradition, and just a little bit of a chill down your spine, subscribe to the channel because there's a new story waiting for you every week.